Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update. Thank you as always for joining us. So much to talk about. The Biden document scandal has escalated. We have new information about the disposition of Schiff and the Intelligence Committee. Some good news there. Judicial Watch visited with President Trump last week, or I should say President Trump visited with Judicial Watch last week. I'll talk to you about that as well. Plus, we've got new video of the horrible attack on Paul Pelosi. I'll talk about that. And new lawsuits by Judicial Watch to uncover the big tech censorship collusion with big government, major litigation that we've undertaken on behalf of you, the American people. Plus, new documents about the targeting of James O'Keefe by the Biden administration, an update on that. So a lot going on. It's good. So much is going on. I even wrote myself notes here. And I just realized why I don't write myself notes. Not because I don't want to keep a records, because now I look at the notes, I don't understand what I've written. And they're not really meaningful to me. But it says here, Biden search, Pence. Well, there's the headline. So there was another shady search of one of Joe Biden's residences that came up with more classified documents or documents marked as classified. And of course, this search was conducted in a way that protected Joe Biden and allowed him certain benefits that were not afforded President Trump, further highlighting the disparate treatment between Biden and Trump in the way these so-called document searches have been conducted. There was no raid. I'm aware of no grand jury. They let Biden's lawyers watch them do the search. It's not even clear if the new special counsel was involved in this search. Did they bypass him to do it? It's unclear. And what's interesting is not only did they find additional classified information or documents marked classified from his time as vice president, but they found information that was classified from his time as senator, which legally is a wowzer of a development, because whatever argument he has, and I think there are substantial arguments that I'll go over with you again, that records he had as vice president that were classified, he had a right to keep and use as his own after he left office. But that's not the case. There's no constitutional or procedural or legal basis for him to keep records that were classified from his days of the Senate. And that, to me, raises issues of significant criminal liability for him that are unlikely to be pursued, obviously, by this Justice Department. But that's the big news out of this, in addition to the fact that, after 2 months of searching and telling us they had everything, they found more. And it's not clear whether they've done, quote, a sufficient search, unquote, of his beach residence in Rehoboth, Delaware, or frankly anywhere else he may have been hanging out in, including his offices at this Penn Center here in Washington, D.C., which is, as I say, just down the street from us. And now on top of that, the records from his Senate days, as I've been discussing with you over the last, frankly, almost 2 years, because we've been in court with the Daily Caller News Foundation trying to get these records. His Senate records are up, stashed away in the University of Delaware as the result of a secret deal with the university to keep them away from the American people. I think the public disclosure of that part of the deal is until at least 2 years after he leaves office, or political office. So that means every record from his days in the Senate are being kept from the American people. Every record. And now we have reason to believe, as I previously discussed with you here, that the records there include classified information. I mean, if he has classified information in his home from his days in the Senate, it's fair to assume, certainly if you're a law enforcement official who wants to make sure all of that classified information is where it's supposed to be, it's up in Delaware. And I would predict that there is going to be a search. It's probably going to be as shady as the prior searches of the University of Delaware records, the Senate records there, 1,800 boxes worth. And I was on radio with my friend Vince Colonese on WMAL here, and I made that prediction. He says, actually, I have another prediction for you. The search is already taking place, or is taking place as we speak, meaning this is the way the Biden operation goes. They pretend they're being forthcoming, they pretend they're being forthright, when in fact they're operating as if they have something to hide. And it was interesting that CNN had a story that the Justice Department had to threaten a subpoena, and that they were unhappy with the way the Biden administration had talked about these searches. For instance, they said in disclosing finally, or in discussing the uncovering of classified information allegedly in the Penn office, they didn't disclose a material fact that they found classified information in his home. And they knew about it when they were saying, oh, look, we found him in the office. And you leave out the fact you didn't find him in the home? I tell you, if Trump pulled that, there'd be raids all over America. Every one of his properties probably would have been raided. But Biden gets a pass. And again, I want to highlight something, because some of you may not want to hear this, but in my view, the legal reality is that based on prior Justice Department positions, prior National Archives positions, and a key court decision in a case that Judicial Watch brought to get records, or to get the National Archives to get records that Bill Clinton kept after he left office. And we were told to go jump in a lake. No one can second guess a president. His description or his designation of presidential versus personal records, there's really no enforcement mechanism. Certainly the archives is in no position to judge or to go after a president's records after he leaves office. In fact, the Justice Department told the court, you can look in the transcript, we presume if a president has records after he leaves office, they're personal. And under the Presidential Records Act, the president has these powers that are awesome in scope and power, right? And that's all kind of based on his position as commander-in-chief and such, and chief executive. And the Presidential Records Act says for the purpose of presidential records and the designations and preservation and judgment calls, the vice president has the same powers. So every former and president and vice president shouldn't have to worry about this. And this is the, I say, in many ways it's an outrage, and I'll tell you why, but it's also an absurdity. You had these corrupt incompetents at the Justice Department who were anti-Trump fanatics, in my view, thinking we've got Trump on these records issues and we're just going to change the rules, reinterpret the law, do a 180 to justify harassing him and raiding his home. Now, they're evidently, at least publicly, there was no one sensibly saying, well, what about other former presidents? What about other former vice presidents? And I say evidently because maybe someone did quietly say to Vice President Biden, hey, you guys may want to check to make sure that you're not in the same boat as Trump is. So as a result now, because of this anti-Trump fanaticism and this abuse, every former president and every former vice president faces criminal liability over their records handling based on the Justice Department changing the rules to target and harass Trump. And so the archives gets him, and I've highlighted this for you repeatedly over the last year or so, that this scandal's been taking place. And sure enough, the goofballs at the National Archives, they send a letter to all the former presidents and vice presidents who are alive saying, by the way, can you please search for your personal records and make sure there's no classified records? Well, it's crazy town. It's absolute crazy town. Now, if Joe Biden was listening to my advice, he'd say this is crazy. It's obviously interfering with the office of the presidency and my former presidential, the members of my club, the ex-president's club or the president's club, and the vice president's club. We can't operate. A current president and vice president can't operate. And obviously, if they're worried that after they leave office, some bureaucrat at National Archives is going to launch a criminal inquiry into how they handle documents. Documents that, frankly, the classification of which all flows from the powers of the president as commander-in-chief. I mean, just think of the absurdity right now, frankly, of the Justice Department that is run by President Biden. They say that it's independent. It's not independent constitutionally, nor should it be. making an issue that the President of the United States has classified records he shouldn't have. How does that work? That's the absurdity of this. So when we practice to deceive, I don't know what the rest of that phrase is, or when you engage in this misconduct, they reap the whirlwind. Whatever the metaphor is, however I want to mix it, it fits here. So they threw out the rule book to target Trump, and now that rule book is nowhere to be found to protect other presidents and vice presidents from this abuse. And that all being said, all of those protections I think that presidents and vice presidents have under the law, because remember, Judicial Watch was on the other side of this issue, and we lost. That's why we're sensitive about it. And now they're taking Judicial Watch's position after they took the opposite position to deny us access to Clinton records. No. We're not going to get away with it as far as we're concerned. We're going to speak out about it. But as I said earlier, the vice president or president, doesn't matter what their title is, they don't get to keep records because they were senators. So any classified records that he kept as a senator is something that is on its face in violation of law. Now, whether he can be prosecuted for that as a president, it's not clear. It's unlikely, because the Justice Department has a policy that makes sense constitutionally, in my view, that they can't really prosecute a sitting president. It's like the president prosecuting himself. It doesn't make constitutional sense. But that criminal liability isn't going to disappear in 2 to 6 years whenever President Biden is no longer president. So that's the big news, right? And of course now Vice President Pence did another looking at his records, and he found classified records among some of the boxes he had taken. Now, is he facing criminal liability? Should he? Of course not. Should Biden, because he's got records that were being used? I don't think so, at least not those records he had from his vice presidency. And nor should Trump, which is, of course, the big issue. And Biden should frankly shut this all down. He won't. Garland should shut this all down. He won't, because they went out on a political limb, and it's like one of those cartoons. They've sawed themselves, right? And now the limb's falling, and the cliff is on the other side. There's nothing they can do, and they're falling into the political abyss. And I used to think that because the conspiracy theory was, or the analysis was, and I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory because the left uses that to diminish the analysis. But the analysis was that this whole Biden records thing is the Democratic Party kind of coming up with ways to get Biden out of office. And I thought, well, that's probably not the case. It was just corrupt incompetence by the Biden gang. But as time goes on and just gets worse and worse, and you see the complaints of Democratic senators about the way this has been handled, and other Democrats, you might wonder, or begin to wonder, if that some Democrats are seeing this as a crisis that they won't want to let go to waste in terms of changing out Biden or inviting primary challenges to him and making them more inviting. So that's a political analysis. I don't know which way is which, but I kind of revert back to the simplest analysis, is that the corrupt, incompetent Justice Department and National Archives exceeded their authority and abused power and abused the rule of law to target Trump. And now the same situation, it's apples to apples to apples, is implicating Joe Biden, implicating Mike Pence, who knows, Al Gore, Dan Quayle, George W. Bush. What about the estates of dead presidents? Presidents Reagan and Presidents Bush. The Presidential Records Act began, I think, in 1980, but the classification system, I think, began, was it during the Eisenhower administration? Doesn't matter. But the point is, you can go back decades and start snooping around for classified information. And I love the Senate angle, right? And I have a feeling that one of the reasons the senators are mad at Biden, because now someone is going to look at the Senate and say, well, what do you have? If Biden did this, did anyone else in the Senate do this? How do you all handle classified records there? Are there other senators with similar liabilities? It's a fair question. Same goes for the House. I mean, if he's taking records home, and I can just imagine, because I was talking to someone, I was doing an interview on Twitter the other day, and they said, well, aren't there specific regulations and processes for tracking these documents? And my understanding, and my answer was yes. But when when someone is coming in for a briefing or sharing a record, and some politician full of himself says, well, the rules don't apply to me, what is that person supposed to do? You know, the rules get bent or ignored. And that's, I think, typically what happened, certainly if indeed these are classified records from the Senate that were improperly taken by Biden, that's probably what happened. These senators think they all think they're all little mini presidents over there, right? They're all presidents in waiting. They see themselves as the equivalent of the president. You talk to some of these senators, not all of them, but a lot of them are. They walk around like they're Louis XIV sometimes. So I suspect this Biden problem with classified records is, especially for senators who've been there forever and a day, which many of them have been, is going to be a significant issue. So this is the whirlwind that everyone is reaping because of the anti-Trump animus. By the way, that was basically egged on a little bit by many Republicans who don't like Trump in this town. So it's really kind of a absurd crisis in that sense, but because it's putting the presidency at risk in terms of criminalizing the everyday operations of the presidency because of this senseless targeting of Trump. It harms our Constitution. It harms our constitutional organization, our constitutional structure of government, because the president has this to worry about. And maybe, maybe the law should protect classified records more directly, but the president's the president. They're only classified because of his authority, typically, or by statute. So there's no way of getting around the president's authority related to classified records. And when you have that unlimited authority, essentially under the Constitution, who is the archives to second guess it, or some hack politicized prosecutor at the Justice Department who supposedly is working for the government, and he's not more important than the president, or even frankly former presidents in the exercise of their duties. So if you're confused, you should be. You know why? Because this is just Keystone Cops with an element of corruption. And God help the country, because this is what our Justice Department and our justice system has come down to. But to kind of sum it up, to be clear, under the way the law is supposed to be interpreted by, and has previously been interpreted by the Justice Department, validated by a court, that a president and vice president, if they have a classified record after they leave office, they don't, quote, have to designate it or whatever. If they have it, it's presumed to be declassified, meaning personal. So, as I said with Trump, it was much ado about nothing, but it's the Justice Department that said it's a lot of something. And as a result, Biden is in the same water as Trump. And frankly, maybe Pence is as well. And who knows what Obama has. I guarantee Obama plays these games as well. He's still in D.C., right? His home up the street. It's about a 15-minute drive from here. If the FBI doesn't know where it is, we can direct them to the house. This city is so corrupt, I can't tell you. But thank God for Judicial Watch, because I don't know what we'd do if we weren't here. And along those lines, we had a great victory. And I say we, meaning the American people. The United States of America is a bit safer today because Kevin McCarthy, the new Speaker of the House, did the right thing. And he barred Adam Schiff, one of the most unethical members of Congress, and Eric Swalwell, who was kind of his deputy hack colleague on the Intelligence Committee, who irredeemably compromised himself as a result of a relationship with a rather obvious Chinese agent, were kicked off the Intelligence Committee. And McCarthy was able to do that on his own because the Intelligence Committee is what is called a select committee, right? So it's a special committee that essentially is allowed to continue at the sufferance of the leadership of the House, in this case the Speaker. So he can do it on his own. And of course the left is outraged, but Adam Schiff lied repeatedly about classified information he had in front of him to get Trump. I mean, that's really the summary of it. And he can't be trusted with any classified information. And frankly, he shouldn't be on any committee. Any committee. And so when you have someone like that with access to classified information, our country's at risk. And he abused his authority to run impeachments against Trump, even though he knew there was no basis for them. And one of Schiff's specific lies was about the Nunes memo, which exposed the FISA abuse on Trump. And Schiff put out misinformation, I hate the word, basic lies, saying that the Nunes memo had no foundation. It was the complete opposite. I mean, Schiff was walking around saying, I've got evidence that Trump colluded with Russia. And he didn't. He was lying. And now we just found out from the latest Twitter files, he was abusing his office, his staff, and to try to get people kicked off of Twitter and suppress criticism of him over his targeting and his abuse of Trump. And he was suggesting that anyone who's promoting the Release the Memo hashtag on Twitter, which was out there at the time the Nunes memo was not public, was a Russian bot. So all these Americans who wanted the truth, you had this Schiff abusing his office to try to get censored by suggesting they were acting as foreign agents. This man should be on no committee, let alone a committee, where he has access to classified information. And as I said previously about Swalwell, he was messing around with a Chinese agent. He says, well, I cooperated with the FBI when they told me there was something up with her. Well, what was wrong with him that he didn't figure out there was something up with her almost immediately? He knew he was in a sensitive slot, and this obvious foreign national is slotting up next to him, to put it charitably, with financial support and at fundraisers, and then evidently they had a relationship beyond that. What sort of maljudgment? That's the most charitable interpretation. He should be nowhere near national security information. Now the next fight is going to be over Ilhan Omar, and there's been allegations about marriage fraud, tax fraud, campaign finance fraud, immigration fraud, none of which has been pursued by either the Ethics Committee or, frankly, the federal agencies that are supposed to do it. But there is concern about her anti-Semitic comments. Now, if I were voting to remove her from the committee, that's the reason I'd be voting to remove her. I'd say I don't want her on committees until we figure out what's her deal in terms of these ethics issues. We had filed ethics complaints, I think, not once but twice against Omar. Same with Schiff. We filed an ethics complaint against him not once but twice. So that's reason enough to vote her out. But I don't know if she's going to be kicked off the Foreign Affairs Committee, because that committee, because it's a standing committee, meaning it's there irrespective of the leadership, the full House has to vote whether to kick her off. And there are a few Republicans who don't like the idea of doing it. They just don't like the idea of kicking someone off in principle because they're saying things that, however terrible, are protected by the First Amendment. So I don't know if she's going to get kicked off or not. But I tell you, if you're looking to kick people off, this is all just a start in my view. As I've said before, they should remove from any committee those who served on the January 6th committee who abused that authority to harass citizens based on their First Amendment rights and freedoms, meaning that they were disputing elections or otherwise participating in the political process, and they were being harassed and punished through abuse of power by the January 6th committee members. They should not be allowed to abuse any more power, even as a minority party representative on any other committee in the House, at least when these conservatives supposedly are running the House. Same goes for those members of the House Ways and Means Committee who voted to abusively obtain and then release the confidential tax returns of President Trump. Nothing like that's ever been done in American history, to target a citizen's IRS returns for release to try to embarrass him. They should be all thrown off the House and Ways and Means Committee. Now, I've raised this with members, and I've been told, well, there's no consensus in the caucus, meaning the Republicans, as I said, they'd have to have a majority vote in the House to have that happen. Well, you know, my view is give the members a call. Tell them what you think about these issues. Are they serious about House corruption or not? Are they serious about abuse of power or not? And why aren't they doing and exercising all the tools they have available to them to hold fellow members accountable? And I don't think you're going to hear a good answer. And you know what? Even if they lose, they should go on record and vote. Are you in favor of abuse of American citizens or not? That's an interesting vote to have. But good news, Swalwell is off the Intelligence Committee. Although now he's running for the United States Senate, so he may not even be in the House much longer. So I don't know what's going to happen there. Next up, there's some big news that's frankly 2 or 3 months too late. They finally released the body cam, police body cam, and other videos of the maniacal attack on Paul Pelosi in his and Nancy Pelosi's home in San Francisco. Now, as you know, and if you've been following this story closely, it happened back in October, November. It's been months since this incident happened. Typically, these types of videos are released quickly. Instead, it's been months. Judicial Watch had asked for records, asked for the videos. We were told they weren't going to be released. Some media organizations ended up going to court, and the court did and enforced the law, as has been previously enforced, and ordered the release of the records. And the records show a terrible attack. And the policy issue, and the first video we'll show while I'm talking is the U.S. Capitol Police video of the Pelosi attacker breaking in the back of his home. And you'll see the video, you see all the noise the guy's making, and my question is, where was the U.S. Capitol Police? What is the purpose of having a video surveillance like this without alarms or other processes that get protection for the House? And I don't care, there's no excuse that Nancy Pelosi wasn't there. I mean, an attacker isn't going to know that. You just presume the location has to be secured. So to me, this is another security breakdown by the U.S. Capitol Police under Nancy Pelosi's watch. Not that she had that she was trying to get herself harmed, but look, there's got to be a basic level of security and competence for our elected leadership. And I don't believe in a security state that keeps them away from the American people. But certainly the Speaker of the House should have sufficient security in this day and age. I mean, when you're seeing the video here, how is it, that happened, and 30 minutes later, still nothing had been done until Paul Pelosi tried to call 911 and basically, while his life was at risk, try to speak in code to convince the 911 operator he needed help. I'm not going to play that for you. And then the attack happened. And here's the body cam footage. I'm gonna play it for you in its entirety. Before I play it for you, I should warn you, you may not want to watch it. There's a few curse words, which isn't going to necessarily be the end of the world for you. But it's extremely disturbing because it depicts the attack, not graphically, but you see enough of it to be, that you may find it very disturbing. So you may want to just fast forward for a minute and 50 seconds or so. But here's the video of the attack that was released in part due to public pressure by Judicial Watch and media organizations.
Yeah, definitely don't want Hall up here. I definitely don't want Hall up here. Hello. Sure this one? Yeah. Fucking said 2620, right? No, 2640. Oh, 40. Yeah, it literally said in there. Hi. Hey guys. How you doing?
How are you?
What's going on, man?
Everything's good.
Hi. Drop the hammer.
Nope. Hey.
What is going on right now?
I'm not getting an answer on call back.
Bro, oh shit. Bro.
From the area that is on the email.
I got him, Michael. Edward 14, Edward, send back up, code 3.
Code 3 back up at 26.
Give me your fucking hand!
Units code
Give me your fucking hand!
40 Broadway for 14 hours.
Edward 14, Edward, send medics, code 3 as well. You got it?
Sorry, 14 number 2 is medic code 3.
Affirmative.
So that's pretty horrible, isn't it? And thank heaven that Paul Pelosi is alive. I mean, he got all his weight into that swing. Would you want to? I wouldn't want to be hit by a hammer on the wrong end of that blow. And the fact that an elderly man like Pelosi was able to survive is a miracle. Is in my view a miracle. So thank God he's alive. And you know the reason this information is important to have is because he was the husband of the third most powerful person in the United States of America in our political system, at least on the elected side. And the American people have a right to see what happened here. Kudos to the police to, in really incredibly difficult circumstances, immediately jumping and stopping that guy from further hurting him. But boy, the fact that it came to that, I just hope, and if I were Kevin McCarthy and those responsible for security on the House side, and frankly the Democrats in the Senate, you know, hopefully this is a nonpartisan issue, you know, figure out what the heck is going on with the police force. Because if I were a member, I would not feel secure, given what happened on January 6th and what happened to Mr. Pelosi. I think there's a level of competency, a lack of sufficient security and training to protect not only the members there, but those who visit. And we saw that on January 6th, where it's clear that the police, frankly, were all out of sorts. They didn't know what to do. And a lot of that is training and poor leadership. If things been fixed, what do you think? I doubt it. So we'll continue, you know, and one thing about the Capitol Hill Police, I will remind you, it is the only police force in America that has no transparency requirements under law. Now, Judicial Watch is trying to vindicate the rule of law there by suing the board that monitors the Capitol Hill Police. Effectively, Capitol Hill Police, not effectively, but I think directly their defendant. We're seeking the January 6th videos and emails. Now, that lawsuit initially was against the Pelosi, you know, it's the Pelosi Congress. Now it's the McCarthy Congress. Is he going to release all these emails? Is he going to continue to fight Judicial Watch in court? I hope not. It's now 3 weeks. We still don't have the videos. They say they want to release them. They're still not released. There are only 270 emails. What's the big deal about releasing them? See, to me, there's a level of urgency here. You know, we've been lectured on January 6th. Those of us who are concerned about election integrity have been called terrorists, maligned and smeared and defamed. And yet there's key information about the security of the Capitol, how that day unfolded, who knew what and when, who's responsible for failures of security. And it's this, oh, we can't get it approach. We're in court right now seeking to vindicate the rule of law, the common law right that all Americans have, that a law, you know, a concept that predates our Constitution. The right of public access to government information. And there's no doubt applies to Congress in these circumstances. But the Pelosi Congress has told us that they have sovereign immunity. What does sovereign immunity mean? It means that no one can sue them. They haven't granted anyone the right to sue them. They're unsuable unless they allow it to happen. And they said even if the records are, quote, public records, in theory that these, quote, aren't public records in fact, because they're not records as defined as, you know, they're not public records under the definition, and obviously that's just bunk. And they're not, and there's no public interest in getting them released. Do you have any interest in seeing the emails and videos? I know I do. So when is Mr. McCarthy and his colleagues going to release the information? That's what I want to know. speaking of documents, one of the big issues is, I think, to go back, is I think this Biden document issue is really a Hunter Biden scandal at its heart. Because who would be using classified records in these various places other than someone like Hunter? That's my suspicion. But, you know, if you ask these questions, the big media purposely ignores you or attacks you. Or in the case of asking questions about the Hunter laptop, infamously suppressed the story. You had a media company, the New York Post, expose the Hunter laptop, and immediately big tech censored the story, Twitter censored the story, and it looks like the FBI was involved in that because they were warning Facebook and Twitter and such that the Russians are going to interfere, be on the lookout. And I think it was Zuckerberg who said recently, he said, well, you know, that we're being given this warning, and then the Hunter laptop story comes out, and we thought, well, that's what they were telling us about, so we suppressed it for them. And in the Twitter files, it's pretty clear the FBI was doing the same thing with Twitter, and it was even more explicit. They sent them some sort of classified material just the day before Twitter suppressed the New York Post story, which strongly suggests that the FBI was intervening again, because remember, the FBI was already suppressing the internal investigation of Hunter Biden just before the election. And then we know they were pressing Twitter to take down all sorts of other material in a way that would benefit Biden and hurt Donald Trump just before the 2020 election. And so all that's been exposed. These are admissions by Zuckerberg. This is an admission by Elon Musk's Twitter. These extraordinary Twitter files, which I hope you are following. They're some of the most important public policy documents in modern history being released because they document a past effort to successfully, in my view, interfere and direct an election, and an ongoing censorship effort that continues to this day by virtually every significant federal agency, from the White House to the CIA, to the State Department, to the NSA, to HHS, to DHS, to the FBI, to the DOJ, to DOD. So we're not going to rely on Twitter to get all the documents out, even though Elon Musk is doing a great job. We're not going to rely on Zuckerberg to make an admission here and again because, you know, someone asked them the right question accidentally. Judicial Watch does its own litigation, does its own investigations to get the truth out. And so we have filed a federal lawsuit against the Justice Department, basically to get FBI documents on the big tech censorship scandal of the Hunter Biden laptop. The real election interference story. We filed the lawsuit for records of communications between the Federal Bureau of Investigation and social media sites regarding foreign influence in elections, as well as the Hunter Biden laptop story. So we filed the lawsuit. I think we filed it earlier this month. We began asking questions under the FOIA in August. It's been 5 or 6 months that the Justice Department has been ignoring the law. Now remember, that's the agency that's supposed to be enforcing the law. So who do I complain to? The Justice Department about their illegal activity and hiding records. Fortunately, under law, we can go to the federal courts and get our rights vindicated under FOIA. And so we're on equal footing with the Justice Department. You know, it's just 2 lawyers, 1 or 2 lawyers for Judicial Watch, and there's another lawyer trying to manage the case for the Justice Department. So in many ways, it's not David versus Goliath, it's Goliath versus Goliath. Because we're on the side of right, and we have tens of millions of American citizens behind our cause. And the Justice Department relies on the idea that no one cares about these transparency issues to try to get away with this secrecy. We ask for all alerts, notifications, advisories, foreign threat indicators, or similar records provided by any official employee of the FBI to any officer or employee of Meta, which is formerly Facebook, Twitter, or any other social media company, regarding the threat of disinformation disseminated by foreign actors related to any U.S. election. All records of communications between any official or employee of the FBI or any other officer or employee of Meta, Twitter, or any other social media company regarding the laptop reportedly used by Hunter Biden any news media reporting regarding the laptop or its contents, and or the provenance of any information contained in any such reporting. Because you may recall there was this cadre of leftist national security officials who hated Trump, who, once the laptop story broke, immediately and dishonestly, in my view, signed on to a statement saying that it had all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign, even though factually, the New York Post, which is a long established record, was a paper established by Thomas Jefferson, had validated the sourcing of this. It wasn't a Russian disinformation campaign. And it's shameful that these were Trump agencies. And what had happened was the whole Russia disinformation lie, or Russia collusion lie, put out by Schiff and Company, pursued by Mueller and, to try to destroy Trump, it scared off all these Republicans. So they're like, oh, we're against Russia interference too. So they pretended it was a major issue when in fact everyone knew it was whatever activity they were doing with respect to elections was immaterial. And to the degree it was material, it was because they were helping Hillary. But I digress. Again, in October 2020, in the run-up to the presidential election, the New York Post was able to confirm that Hunter Biden's laptop, which was abandoned at a Delaware computer shop, contained embarrassing and possibly incriminating information about the Biden family. The Post story was censored by Twitter and other social media platforms despite its accuracy. Recent Twitter files, as I note, released by Musk, show that the FBI pressure on Russian disinformation led to the censorship. San Francisco FBI agent Elvis Chan sent 10 documents to Twitter's then head of site integrity, Yoel Roth, through Teleporter, a one-way communication channel from the FBI to Twitter, the evening before the release of the Post story. Intriguing, isn't it? Other Twitter files show the FBI pushed Twitter to also censor countless Twitter users who tweeted concerns and, quote, jokes. So if you joked about the election, the FBI was reading your tweet and trying to get you taken down. About election integrity. So the Twitter was engaged in the FBI was engaged in a massive censorship program run out of San Francisco and the Baltimore field office, approved by the 7th floor. And what did I mean by the 7th floor? FBI management. So the FBI was reading your tweets. And if it fell into the wrong bucket of truth and First Amendment speech, they tried to get it taken down by Twitter. And the other documents show they were actually paying Twitter to do this. $3.5 million at least. So it's not just Donald Trump who was a victim. You likely are a victim of FBI censorship if you are out there tweeting truths or posting truths on Facebook, because we don't have the Facebook files. We don't have the Google files for YouTube. YouTube is still censoring Judicial Watch. Facebook is still censoring Judicial Watch. Facebook is allowing Trump to come back on after 2 years, despite improperly taking him down. And of course, the condition of his coming back on is that he has to restrict his own speech in a way that's in accordance with leftist Democrat talking points that are quite helpful to them in the run-up to the election. I mean, this is election interference that hasn't stopped. And nor has the Biden administration stopped any of this communication process. And I guarantee you the FBI is still working with Facebook and Google to try to censor Americans. The FBI seems to have interfered in the 2020 election to help Joe Biden by encouraging big tech to censor Americans about the Hunter Biden laptop and other debates. And to add to the scandal, they're trying to cover it all up. Now, Judicial Watch is trying to break down the stone walls, smash the stone walls of obstruction here through the FOIA to get the truth. And I tell you, we have a demonstrated record of smashing those walls and getting the truth for you, the American people. And my view is the more truth that comes out, the more accountability there will be. And I think, you kind of see this. The House Republicans are trying to put forward a bill that would, again, reaffirm what I think is already current law that prohibits federal officials from working with social media companies to censor American citizens. They're making it explicit that that's absolutely prohibited, or at least that's what they're trying to propose. So we have a number of anti-censorship lawsuits that are ongoing. We have the lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security that was also using some sort of secret portal that I fear still may be open to try to censor American citizens. They had special relationships with Twitter and these other companies to take down material. And we know states were also using this portal to take down material, including material of Judicial Watches. The California Secretary of State's office had a video that we had posted on YouTube about election integrity matters just before the 2020 election that they took down at the request of the Secretary of State's office, who was working with a campaign operation or a campaign connected firm of Biden's. We have a civil rights lawsuit over that abuse of Judicial Watch, and yours truly. So, I mean, we have lawsuit after lawsuit on this. So we're not just complaining about it, we're going into court to hold up people accountable and get the full truth. Because the Twitter files are only the tip of the iceberg. And one of the other big issues that they were trying to censor on is COVID. Everything COVID was subject to censorship. I've been repeatedly censored over COVID issues. You probably have been too. You raise the wrong question about vaccine, you get censored. You get labeled, mislabeled as misinformation. There's a warning attached to us. I mentioned COVID in this video. I guarantee you Facebook is going to have a warning below this video saying, oh, to see COVID information, go here, suggesting what I'm saying is wrong. And if you go to share this video, which I encourage you to do, there's going to be a warning. You sure you want to share this crap by Tom Fitton? They're not going to say it like that, but that's the effect of the warning label. You sure you want to share this? It's garbage. Twitter files showed also that the drug companies had special ins directly to get people censored who are critical of vaccines, or the mandates, or the masks, or offering alternative treatment analyses and ideas. And the Biden administration's like embraced this fully. It's rare to see the White House, it's not rare, it's unprecedented to see the White House broadly embrace attacks on the First Amendment freedoms of tens of millions of Americans. They've called in big tech companies, and from the podium of the White House, the president and all of his men and women have encouraged big tech companies to censor American citizens. I think in violation of the Constitution and law that raises significant civil liabilities in the least for them, if not criminal liabilities, depending on what happened. And along those lines, Judicial Watch just sued HHS, the Health and Human Services Department, for the Surgeon General's office's contacts with big tech about COVID vaccines. Again, we had a simple request, and we were really specific. This was back in March of last year. We asked for records about, including but not limited to, electronic emails, texts, memoranda, handwritten notes regarding, referring, or relating to any efforts of Alexandria Phillips, who's communications director for the Office of Surgeon General, to contact any employee of Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, Reddit, YouTube, LinkedIn, Tumblr, and Pinterest concerning COVID-19 vaccines. So how many emails could this one person have? How many? Can't be that many. And it's almost a year and they haven't given us jack. Now, Vivek Murthy, who is the U.S. Surgeon General, the Biden Surgeon General, issued a report, a pro-censorship report, a censorship Bible on COVID, quote, confronting health misinformation to, quote, slow the spread of health misinformation during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. And it called for censorship of speech about the vaccine and other COVID controversies. And this is what he said: prioritize early detection of misinformation super spreaders and repeat offenders. Impose clear consequences for accounts that repeatedly violate platform policies. How does that translate? Censorship. I'm a super spreader, according to the Surgeon General. A repeat offender, according to the Surgeon General. Because we're putting out information that they don't like, anything that's seen as depressing the individual's willingness to take the vaccine or listen to their propaganda on COVID issues is seen as a misinformation super spreader. And they want us targeted and censored. So that's why we've asked for that office's communications. They wanted to get records on what we were saying. The Surgeon General directed and demanded tech companies, and I think they haven't done it yet, or they've resisted it, turn over information about individuals who spread COVID-19 misinformation. In a formal notice, Murthy requested major tech platforms submit information about the prevalence and scale of COVID-19 misinformation on their sites, from social networks, search engines, crowdsourced platforms, e-commerce platforms, and instant messaging systems. They want to look at your text messages, your Facebook IMs, and report to the feds about it. This is East German-like surveillance of American citizens in order to suppress their speech. We shouldn't tolerate it. We should seek the protection of the law to make it stop. And the first core step in doing that, A, is talking about this outrage here, and then getting the details. So hopefully someone can do something about it. I mean, we've got litigation over, as I say, this type of censorship to try to stop it. Others have as well. You have state attorney generals pursuing information about federal agency censorship that's getting key information showing the White House was brazenly trying to get material taken down. This is the broadest attack on the First Amendment I don't know of anything comparable in terms of the size and scope. I mean, it's one thing in the early part of the 20th century or the early part of our founding father, of the founding era, where we had the Alien Sedition Acts, which was often at odds with the notion of free speech. I mean, today we have tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, of American citizens being harmed and having their civil liberties restricted by this free speech attack, coordinated by the federal government, endorsed by the left media, endorsed by the entire political media complex, the academic sector, the transnationalists. I don't know if you've been watching news about the World Economic Forum in Davos. I wasn't invited to Davos. I don't know why they don't want me to speak there. I'll tell them a few things. Maybe that's why they don't want me to speak. But they were talking about the, censorship. There's this anti-Americanism that is endemic on the left. Is not only do they hate America, but they hate our freedoms, and they really hate free speech, because the communists need to suppress free speech in order to prosper. So we're doing our best to try to expose it and stop it. And I tell you, we're not going to stop. We're not going to wait for Congress to do it. We're not going to wait. Obviously, the Justice Department isn't going to do anything. And Elon Musk is going pretty darn far. It's really quite incredible in releasing these documents, which really put Twitter on the block in some respects. I mean, he still owns Twitter. I mean, Twitter may have some liability over the censorship as well. But kudos to Elon Musk for exposing the truth about this collusion. And now what Judicial Watch is doing is we're following up on his disclosures and other disclosures to get the full scope so we can end the censorship that's ongoing against you, my fellow citizens. One of the groups out there that, we're almost natural friends. And of course, we are friends organizationally. And I've always admired James O'Keefe, who runs Project Veritas. He's a great journalist. He and his colleagues do great muckraking to expose corruption in government and the private sector and lies, usually by using videos, investigative video techniques that get their targets to confess to misconduct or expose misconduct that they otherwise would not highlight. And most recently this week, they were able to communicate or record a Pfizer executive, a doctor, who was a senior guy there at Pfizer, at least according to reports, who said that Pfizer essentially was wanting to, but depending on how you interpret his comments, already was directing the evolution of the COVID virus in order to develop vaccines. So that translates to me as gain of function work on COVID in order to get vaccines, which obviously they would market. Dangerous, right? Could be in violation of law depending on what's going on. So you know why James O'Keefe is the target of the deep state and their defenders in the big media. He exposed Pfizer a few years ago on vaccine issues and concerns they had, similar type of investigative work. And Judicial Watch exposed how Pfizer and the FBI evidently were working together to try to get him for that. And then his home was raided by the FBI and the home of other Project Veritas journalists, an unprecedented series of raids, as they were supposedly investigating the handling of Ashley Biden, who is what, Biden's daughter or granddaughter? Daughter, right?
I think daughter, yeah.
Diary that had some discomforting details about her relationship with Joe Biden and his conduct. Now, the New York Times essentially knew about the raid as it was happening, if not before it happened. So the question was the FBI or the Justice Department working with the New York Times in that regard? The raid was so outrageous, you can read about it, but they took him out, handcuffed him outside of his apartment in his underwear while they ransacked his home, right? Journalist. And Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit after we got the proverbial hand to the face by the Justice Department about what we think was a leak by the DOJ or FBI about the raid, which would be a violation of law. And we found documents. They just gave us 11 pages of heavily redacted documents. I should have printed them out so I could have showed you the redactions. But maybe we'll just flash them while I'm talking on screen. And the records are redacted in large part, and others are, 3 pages at least, are withheld in their entirety because they said the agency claims they're not part of the responsive record, which makes no sense legally, and they're going to probably have to give those records anyway. But this is the sort of thing we have to face with the Justice Department and FBI all the time. They try to sneak by illegal redactions and withholdings by us all the time. We just have to be fighting. And because Judicial Watch is America's #1 expert on FOIA, we know how to fight. Our attorneys are just great in that regard. We had sued for all records of government and non-governmental communications between officials in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, the agency or the sub-agency Justice Department responsible for this, and the New York Times regarding Project Veritas, James O'Keefe, Ashley Biden, and others. The records reveal that the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District was in contact with New York Times reporters, including William K. Rashbaum, referred to in the email chains as Willie, so they were on a first-name basis with him, and been protests before, during, and after the raids on the homes of O'Keefe and other Project Veritas reporters, or at least they were reporters at the time. So the records include a November 4th, 2021 email. I think the raid was on the 4th. 6th. It was on the 6th. It was 2 days later. About a search in Mamaroneck. So was this a did they have precog information about this search? The chains labeled Search in Mamaroneck, which is where James lived, Ray redacted diary, which is obviously Biden's diary. This is what the text says. Willie Rashbaum from the Times just called and says they know or believe that a search warrant is being conducted in Mamaroneck this morning, a location that is either the residence of Eric Cochrane, who I think was a Veritas person, who may or may not be a whistleblower or a Project Veritas office. He believes that this is in connection with the Florida investigation into whether Project Veritas stole or purchased a stolen diary belonging to Ashley Biden. It's redacted, but it's obviously Biden. And they later include in this email chain redacted details about 2 searches regarding the homes of O'Keefe and then Project Veritas journalist Spencer Meads. Times now believes, one of the writers of the Southern District, was a public affairs official in the Southern District of New York, Times now believes it's not, quote, a Florida investigation, but an SDNY, Southern District of New York investigation, and it involves more than just the diary. No elaboration on that. And so then they get another email saying, O'Keefe arrest? The Times hears O'Keefe was arrested this morning. In fact, he wasn't, but he was in custody for a period of time during the search. And of course, they redacted the rest of the email improperly. You'll see here. We'll throw it up on the screen. It's pretty clear looking at these emails that the New York Times was tipped off about the raid. It's not clear who tipped them off. And I think it's curious, these emails, at least the parts that have been released, don't express any interest, seemingly, about how the New York Times figured out this raid was taking place, or raids in the case of the Project Veritas. So this is a really interesting set of documents. You can go to Judicial Watch's website. Maybe we'll have a link below. You can look at them directly. And as I said in our statement in relation to this, that, and I'm not going to read every single email we got, but you can look at them yourself. The New York Times was obviously, as I said, tipped off about the unprecedented raid on the home of James O'Keefe and other Project Veritas journalists. And these new Justice Department records may raise more questions than answers about how that happened. And you have to remember what this investigation was about. It was about the mishandling of Ashley Biden's diary. Why is this an FBI issue? Why is it a state authority issue? You know, the allegation was that she left it behind, but they made the case that, well, she didn't leave it behind, and it was, quote, stolen property and should have been messed with. You know, I don't know which way you come down on that. Does it warrant FBI involvement in raids on the homes of journalists who, by all accounts, didn't even have the diary in the end and had insisted it be turned over to law enforcement, as Judicial Watch uncovered in other documents obtained about this issue down in Florida? What was going on in the FBI and Justice Department that had them so anxious about investigating this? Of course, they were directed, or the complaint came from Ashley Biden's lawyer. And I guess if you're in the Biden Justice Department, a personal lawyer, the Biden family can get all sorts of criminal investigations going, even though the public interest would suggest that it's best handled at the states, assuming there's anything criminal going on at all. And in this case, they did the unprecedented raid on the home of a journalist, at least unprecedented in modern memory. So Judicial Watch is going to keep on snooping around here, using the FOIA here. This case is not over. As I said, some of these documents we believe have been withheld improperly, at least parts of them, in whole or in part. So more is coming. And again, the interesting thing is, this whole case essentially confirms the Ashley Biden diary, that it was her diary. And the content, you can go look up, is very interesting in that regard. Now, I think two people who were had taken the diary or involved in trying to sell it were forced by the Justice Department to plead out. But, you know, I don't give too much credence to some poor saps in Florida being targeted by the Justice Department pleading out when they have all the federal government coming down on them like a ton of bricks. It's quite the scandal. And once again, when it comes to defending the media is rarely there. And it's Judicial Watch who's defending the First Amendment rights of the media by investigating the abuses of the media, in this case, the abuses of James O'Keefe, who frankly deserves a Pulitzer Prize. I would be happy if Judicial Watch shared a Pulitzer Prize with Project Veritas. I think that would be a good twofer, don't you agree? And I think Donald Trump just sued the Pulitzer Board for giving a prize to the fake news organizations that pushed the Russian smears against him that were knowingly false. Good for him on that. I don't know whether the case is going to go anywhere, but he's in the right target area in highlighting the corruption of the Pulitzer Board. And I raised that issue with Donald Trump because Judicial Watch had a major donor event last week in Florida at which Donald Trump made a presentation. And it was a great presentation. He took some questions from the audience, you know, and I know he's running for office. He wasn't there campaigning. He was there because he likes Judicial Watch and he likes our anti-corruption work. But one of the things he noted, for instance, and he has some interesting insights about public policy, even though the left would have you believe, you can't listen to him on anything. he was talking about the Biden invasion, the immigration crisis, and he says, you know, some folks think they're bringing in these millions of illegal aliens to kind of affect the elections. And his point was, no, they don't need to do that. They are kind of already messing with elections with or without illegal aliens voting improperly. So those were the kinds of insights that he brought to bear. We had a great presentations on the issues of, you know, the illegal immigration crisis, the censorship crisis, the rule of law crisis, the January 6th abuse crisis. All of those issues Judicial Watch covered. And we talk about this all the time, and so we're happy to be with our major supporters down there who allow this work to go on thanks to their generosity. And any one of you who support Judicial Watch, this is what happens with your support. You allow us to sue for you, the American people, and to vindicate the rule of law and the U.S. Constitution. We protect whistleblowers, we protect victims of government abuse. And there's no one who does the sort of heavy lifting Judicial Watch does to expose what the government's up to and to uncover government corruption. And I can tell you, when Congress gets going on these investigations, Judicial Watch will stand with anyone in Congress, anyone who wants to get to the truth about government corruption. So to the degree Republicans finally want to get their act together and do these serious investigations, there's a select committee, for instance, on the weaponization, a select subcommittee, I think it's called, on the weaponization of the federal agencies, the weaponization of government. We're happy to help. In fact, we're happy to give them all our documents. They're all on the internet site. We'll just give them the URLs, right? So, President Trump knows who Judicial Watch is. You can bet Hillary Clinton knows who Judicial Watch is. And many, many members of Congress know who Judicial Watch is. And one of the reasons they do is because of your support that allows us to do this great work that exposes this government corruption and does the work that the media supposedly used to do, Congress ought to do, and the federal agencies simply refuse to do, if not outright obstruct. So we're glad to be able to do that. We're honored by President Trump's appearance. I think we'll have the video of the speech out relatively soon, so hopefully you can see that and get a feel for how his speech went and learn what he thinks about Judicial Watch, not only that, but the other issues he talked about. And so I encourage you, again, to support Judicial Watch. You can go to our website at judicialwatch.org, judicialwatch1word.org, click on the donate button, and support our work. And otherwise, one other way to support our work is to spread the information. We're an educational group. I hope I'm educating you, that you think you know more, or you know more as a result of this video and our other activities than you did before. And I encourage you to share this information with your family members, with your circles of friends, with folks who you work with. Be careful there, because some people may not want to work with you anymore, depending on what you share. Members of your church, you know who likes you and who would take your word. And I tell you, one of the best ways, or one of the best sources for new Judicial Watch supporters are current Judicial Watch supporters, because they say, hey, Judicial Watch is doing great work. You should see what they're doing here. And then they say, oh, Joe or Sally thinks this work is great. Let me see what it is. Oh, and I agree with them, my friends. And then they start supporting us as well. So get the word out about our work, support our work, and so we can do more and better of it. And with that, I'll see you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.